we'll be joined by someone closer to home, Bre Boswell, one of our WEBTOON team members, to cover our last topic, working with an editor. I'm your moderator for today's workshop, Kirsten Pointer, WEBTOON's University Program Specialist. Our guest for this workshop is celebrated WEBTOON editor Bre Boswell. She's worked with award-winning original series, including Olympus, The Kiss Bet, and Down to Earth, and new series that launched with WEBTOON Originals just this year, including Finding Fiends and Be My Villain. All of these series got their start on WEBTOON Canvas, just like yours. Most WEBTOON Originals start as Canvas self-published series, and Bre has worked with many creators who have made the leap from independent storytellers to a more collaborative career working with an editor. Her personal experience with production methods and animation and illustration also supports her work with other creators. She's joined us today to share insights on what it's like to work as a creator with an editor and how these professional partners can support your series. Please join me to welcome Bre Boswell.
Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. Thank you for the intro, Kirsten. So, yes, welcome to Working with an Editor workshop. I'm sure this is a big question for a lot of people, as not a lot of folks are working with an editor. So you might be asking the big question, what is an editor? So an editor is by definition just a creator's editorial, managerial, and moral support throughout the life cycle of the series. We will be offering all of our tools and all of our knowledge and guidance so that you, the creator, can be guided towards a more successful and more high quality series. And why are editors important? You touched it in the last slide, but we will be focusing on our more managerial roles so that you, the creator, can focus on your creative roles. We will be helping you sustain productivity with clarity. So reviewing your work, we might help you brainstorm ideas. We'll help you manage your deadlines. We are just there to assist you in any way possible. So you will always have somebody by your side as you work through the life cycle of your series. So to onboard an editor onto your team is probably the biggest question, is like, where do I find an editor? Where do I get started? And what will it look like once they are on my team? Workflow. So basically, when you start working with an editor, they will be assisting you all throughout the life cycle of the series. That includes the development, the pre-production, the production, and post-production, so after your series has launched, so on and so forth. We will be basically aiding the creator through their creative journey. So throughout the whole life cycle of the series, depending on where you are at within the production or post-production, we can help you with as many things as possible. And a helpful tip, editor must understand your story so that we can offer the proper guidance. Again, your editor is here to be your support. It would make a lot more sense if your editor was familiar with your series, familiar with you, your workflow, so that you have the best fruitful companionship throughout the production and the life cycle of your series. Biggest thing I want to point out is that working with an editor, it is a partnership. We are not your supervisor. I think there's a lot of misconception of what an editor does and what their role is. We are not the word of law. We will not also guarantee a series success. What an editor is basically to help support you, give you that outsider's perspective, give you some helpful tips here and there, help manage your deadlines, help manage your series, help you with production if you ever start to slow down with burnout, any writer's block, artist block. The good relationship between an editor and creator is just that openness and that partnership that we will form to make sure that your series is as successful as possible when we are working together. So yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. And then we must lay down expectations. So, why is it important to know what your editor will do while you're working with an editor and what they should do, what they shouldn't do? Again, a lot of people might think, oh, an editor will be doing a lot for me, but what you should never expect your editor to do is be a part of that creative process. That is all you. So we should not be drawing your episodes. We should not be writing your series for you. And that just kind of goes in your IP, it's your creative journey. We are just here to offer the moral support that you might need to make better decisions for your series, be more productive with your production, be more efficient with your deadlines, et cetera, but we are not actually the creative force behind a series. And that kind of goes for originals as well. I might offer my input here and there, but what I'm not doing is drawing a Lore Olympus episode for Rachel, nor am I writing the outcome for Down to Earth as a whole series. I might help with the cliffhangers here and there. So if anything was really upsetting for you, that might have been me, but again, I'm not writing this series and I'm not trying to dictate how the series will go. I also am not going to be holding your hand the whole way. I shouldn't be checking in on you every single day with progress. You should have some sort of responsibility on yourself that you can be productive each day, know what needs to get done, meet those deadlines, and communicate thoroughly with your editor. So going into more of like what an editor should do when you are working with them, again, offering assistance and artistic advice or production efficiency advice, anything to help improve the quality of the work, the efficiency of the work, and things along those lines. So, we might brainstorm together when it comes to like writing the story. I might ask questions where things might be convoluted or confusing so that you can further develop your series in a more productive way and be there for you whenever you might get stuck when it comes to creative stuff. But again, not being the dictating voice behind the creative ideas. We'll also suggest project management tools to help you stay on track and be efficient with your time and your schedule, because I know the deadlines are probably the biggest concern for a lot of creators, and how long it takes them to finish an episode, how long it takes them too long to do this, it takes them too long to do that. So being sure that you're efficient on your time, being sure that you have the right tools to schedule yourself, and that we can deliver those episodes on time. And when it comes to delivering those episodes on time, then the editor will review those deliverables or the episodes for the completion just to make sure everything looks okay. So proofreading or making sure that, everything looks okay. There's no sketch layers still visible or panels missing. So things of that nature. I'm just like the last final double check before things get reviewed and uploaded to WEBTOON. And also keeping lines of communication open so that you will never feel alone during any stage of production. So if you have a question about delivering an episode, you can always ask me. If you have a question about, whether this character should do this or this, then you can ask me. And, anything of those lines, like just trying to keep that communication open for no matter what the product stage or productorial stage is. And again, just making sure that we have that teamwork going. That'll be a heavy theme throughout the entire time we're going to talk about editors and creators relationships. So yes, when we give you our assistance, besides all of that I explained, this is a more like vague example of like me giving assistance to creators. I'm giving like story advice, art advice, formatting advice, and time management. And it's pretty common whenever an editor first onboards a creator that a lot of the notes will be more heavy-handed once you are first onboarded and you're first getting used to working with an editor, working as an original, or just working in general with like an editor. Notes might be a little bit more heavy-handed because you're onboarding that editor. You're trying to get a footing for like what works for them, what works for you. So usually communication will be a lot more often. So later into production, once you kind of get your footing and you understand what is needed from your side to appease editorial, and editorial needing to know what they need to do to help you as the creator, eventually it'll start to die down. There won't be as many comms being open just because of like edits per se. So usually as production goes on, the edits do become less frequent. So here's some examples of like what you should expect during each stage of production when it comes to like editorial notes and so on and so forth. So in pre-production, you and your editor should probably be speaking the most often because you're really talking about getting all of that pre-development assets on board so that you can actually go into production. So this is probably the most heavy-handed, most prominent stage of editorial when it comes to story, because you will be really diving in and making sure that you have everything that you need in order to start production. Production is when you start getting into the more focused edits per episode. So rather than the big picture with the story and pre-production, we're really diving into each episode and getting into the visual edits. So maybe pacing for panels, your formatting in general. What does your composition look like? What do the colors look like? Getting into the more nitty-gritty stuff that could be implemented throughout each episode, and then specific episode edits as well. And then once you get into like post-production or the launch stage, so you're ready for your series to start publishing, the advice will become a little bit more fluid, and it kind of just depends on what you, the creator, might need. So some creators are pretty like excited and they don't really need a lot of assistance. So most of the communication is just on a need-to-need basis. Other times, the creators are still asking for reviews of each episode. So they'll send thumbnails and they'll say, hey, what does this look like? And communication will start to dwindle after that. But it really just depends on like what the creator will need once they start publishing on their publishing schedule. For originals, it's usually week to week. Sometimes they have bi-weekly or even twice or 3 times a week. But if you, a Canvas creator, were working with an editor, so you would just have to communicate with that editor and see what would work best for both of your schedules. And as always, despite experience, no matter if you are an amateur and this was just a hobby and you're wanting to get an editor, or you are a professional and you've worked with editors before, your editor's job will always be to like find your weaknesses and your strengths and use those to your max capacity. So what do you lack and where could they help you strengthen that skill? Again, the ultimate goal of an editor is to give you those knowledges and tools so that you can sustain autonomously and eventually not need all that hand-holding that I mentioned that would be pretty prominent in the early stages of production. Your editor will probably be looking at your work, seeing what works the best, like where's your strengths, and then also trying to find out where you can improve, because I mean, not everyone is perfect, so an editor will be there to help offer that assistance in strengthening those weaknesses. So now we'll move on into taking and applying the critique that your editor probably gave you and how it will look implementing it into your series. So as I mentioned before, understanding your strengths and weaknesses. So, your editor is going to be helping you strengthen any part of your process or your series that might find weak, and then also use your strengths to its max potential. So we'll, again, likely see maybe your paneling could have a little bit more dynamic formatting or composition. Or maybe you have a little weak spot in writing your episode endings. So your editor will try to swoop in and try to see what we can do to work out those weaknesses. But say you have a really good strength in your art, they'll probably push you into a more dynamic visual storytelling direction. So, you'll always have these kind of communications with your editor. So what I like to tell my creators is for them to ask themselves these like important questions, like where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Because I think it's very easy to have your editor tell you what your strengths and weaknesses are, but it's also very important for you to self-acknowledge your own strengths and weaknesses. Because if you're aware of what you're excelling at or what you can grow in, then I think the possibilities are endless, and you and your editor could work on specifics that you want to improve on, or you might want to just shift gears and only focus on your strengths. So working together and finding that balance. you have a strength in storytelling, but maybe your character art is so-so. Maybe you have really good character dialogue and acting, but the formatting is really, really hard to read. So you can't even read the dialogue because it's all congested. So, having this, being able to go through and just like look at these and be able to tell yourself like, okay, this is where I can improve on, or this is where I excel at, will just help, I think, move your production into a more streamlined direction. So kind of going into some examples from the last slide, but these are ways that I could maybe offer my advice on these specific examples in weaknesses. So say you have a weakness in storytelling, I might try to break down the plot as simple as possible, maybe get rid of all the convoluted parts and really focus on your main plot, and any other plots, side plots, B plots, C plots, we will try to input into the A plot a little bit more efficiently and streamlined. So just like really breaking it down so it's easy for you to like visualize. So if you have a weakness in character art, I might say, let's try to make reusable assets so that you don't always have to continuously draw these certain characters over and over. Or maybe they have really intricate designs. For instance, Covenant is a series that I work on. They have tattoos. The creator is not drawing those tattoos every single time. Those are actually reusable brushes. So just inputs those right on the characters, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So working around those difficulties. So even if it's not a weakness per se, it was a hindrance. So we were able to work around that. Color theory, like who doesn't have a weakness in color theory? But finding ways to cheat it so you don't have to know color theory, but just know how to work the program you're using. So maybe if you're using Photoshop, what layer effects can you use to like really enhance the colors, or, things of that nature. So work smarter, not harder. So when it comes to like character acting dialogue, if you have a weakness in writing dialogue, maybe we can focus on the visuals to make those more appealing. If you have a weakness in formatting, the editor would then come in and try to teach you the most efficient ways to format in the most memorable and easy to understand ways. So that's a little bit more easy to address and to work on improving more so than writing dialogue, because that could be a little harder to do. But, each example has its level of difficulty, I would say, as well. So, if backgrounds are hard, then maybe just use 3D models. And that's like an easy fix. You just I slap on the background and that's all I have to do. I don't even have to draw a background again. But, when it comes to making reusable assets for character arts, that's going to take time, and time is valuable. So, you really just have to work with your editor to understand, what could be made from those weaknesses or strengths. So now we're going to get into more types of notes and be a little bit more explanatory about, what the difference is between the types of notes you might receive. So the biggest umbrella of notes is between suggestions and necessary revisions. So I like to say that a lot of the notes that I give my creators are suggestion-based. So they are meant to offer and guide the series to a more impactful manner, or strengthen the series, or give it that oomph that I think could just take it over the edge. And then there's necessary revisions that they might have to be implemented if you maybe agreed upon it during your greenlighting process. So if an editor was like, hey, well, we want to work with you, but we have to change this before we do, that's something that would be a necessary revision. Other necessary revisions could be violations of brand safety, just violation of morals, or it seems problematic. We really only take necessary revisions to the most extreme cause, and other suggestions or other notes might just be the suggestions where we would offer that to be implemented for a better reading experience. So getting from necessary and suggestion-based notes, we have story versus art, and then readability versus creative. So the story versus art is kind of the difference between edits focused on, obviously, the story or the more written material of your series, And then the art edits would be more about the sequential sequences, the visuals, the formatting, yada, yada. I like to mention that, comics are a visual media, but they are written media first. So it does have this dichotomy of both, like they're both necessary. So sometimes story edits are, again, more of a strength for a creator. So then art edits would be probably the heavy-handed for the editor, or vice versa, or maybe none, or both. So really depends. And then readability versus creative. And this is kind of one of my favorites because it's the difference between an easy to read series and a fun to read series. Because again, I think readability is more like, can you legibly read the series? And then my creative edits would be more, well, that was good, but this would be better. So again, more adding a little spice into the mix. And here's some examples of the story versus art and the readability versus creative notes. So story versus art. So story edits would be like about series longevity, character motivations or goals, the world building, episode pacing. So how many beats do you have in an episode? And then hooks, episode hooks, series hooks, season hooks, all the hooks that you need to make your series appealing from the get-go. And then once we get into the production phase, that's when we'll start focusing on art notes. So art notes would be like the character designs, the appeal of your series, like how does it look to the eye? Is it marketable? Will it be a little bit harder to market because of the style? Things of that nature. How does it look color-wise? Is it too muddy? Is there a lot of one color and it's confusing to read? And just, visuals in general. So that's when we get into the readability versus creative, which readability would be like gutter spacing, dialogue, speech bubble placements, and then like general reformatting. So where the panels are on the screen, how big they are they too small, too big, too much gutter space, too little gutter space. And it's all about just making it easy to read on the phone, because that is always like the ultimate goal for Webtoon, is to make it easy to read on a mobile device. And then we get into the creative edits that are more like panel compositions, scene suggestions or rearrangements, expressions, or maybe like figure corrections, so that I kind of compose that into compositions. And then episode pacing, so maybe the visuals maybe they're too fast paced or maybe they're too slow paced. So we might have to adjust the visuals in that way. Yeah, those are the main different types of editorial when it comes to the production stage. So then we go from the notes to the final product. So this is how you adapt those notes into your episodes and to your final product. You have to understand how to use these notes for your benefit. I highlighted in green. Are your editor's notes conclusive advice or suggestive directions? I can be guilty of this sometimes, but whenever I look at an episode, sometimes I don't always have the answer. So I might just offer my vague advice or suggestions, or maybe I'll pose a question, and it doesn't tend to be very concrete advice. And then therefore the creator can take that and kind of think of a way to work that advice or suggestion in their own creative way. I kind of mentioned, a lot of our notes are from an outsider's perspective. So take that with a grain of salt. Like, we are not inside your head, so we can't always give you the right answer. And nor are we supposed to give you the right answer. Again, a lot of our notes should be suggestive. So even if we don't give you concrete advice or concrete notes, you should be able to make do with what you are given to fit your vision. Because again, you are the leader, you are the one in charge, you are making the final calls. So you and your editor should be up to brainstorming and discussing what would work best for your series based on all of the notes that your editor gives you. Your editor's notes might not always be the last and final notes. I have given lots of notes before where I've changed my mind or we go in a different direction. It's completely normal. It's all part of the creative process. It definitely happens more so in the beginning of production rather than like episode 20. By episode 20, we should probably be on the same page at that point. But, it's very easy to get lost in the idea of working with somebody else and making as much revisions to enhance the episode or enhance the series as much as possible. So then we go into professionalism. So communication, the biggest thing. Professionalism in general is like how you should be talking to your editor, how your relationship with your editor should be, things of that nature. And communication is the biggest key on what your relationship will look like with your editor. I am very open to communication with my creators, no matter what time zone or, whatever language they might be comfortable in speaking in. But these are some things that could actually hinder the communication between an editor and a creator. But it is, again, very important to keep those lines of communication open, because I think once you lose those lines of communication, that's where things can fall in the cracks. Mistrust could form and rather negative sentiment towards an editor in general, or an editor could actually develop from you, the creator, if you do not keep your communications open. So easy ways to kind of maintain those communication lines is to set designated meeting times. So rather than communicating whenever necessary, just say, let's meet, I kind of said it in the fourth bullet point, but, having those monthly or bi-monthly or even weekly meetings to keep those meetings streamlined. Or if you are okay with open communication, maybe just between these certain hours. So for me, I work from 10 to 7 p.m. PST. So I let my creators know that if they need to reach me, they can reach me during those times. But after those hours, I prefer email communication that I can just look at the next day. Then also only communicate via one medium. So sometimes creators prefer just speaking through emails. Some creators just hate emails. They find it too professional. So DMs are a little bit more comfortable. So they would prefer that. And then of course, whenever you do receive something from an editor or vice versa, every time a creator sends me something, I'll let them know, hey, I received it. I'll get back to you at this time. And you, the creator, can do that as well. It's just, maintaining that trust that, hey, I've looked at your message. I have read it, just confirming, we'll get back to you at a different time. Having that trust is super important when it comes to the editor-creator relationship. Boundaries. So verbally confirm your editor's roles. I kind of mentioned it very early on in the presentation, but what your editor should and shouldn't do. And that just kind of goes with the unrealistic expectations that some creators might put on their editor. They might think they are completely in control. They can let go of the reins. Their editor will handle everything. But it's good to important that you might have one editor, but your editor might have multiple creators. So it is up to you to have that level of responsibility to make sure you communicate with your editor efficiently, because your editor might not always be 100% available for you, and you might slip through the cracks. But if you reached out, you would be able to insert yourself back into their agenda. So what you would be responsible for would be providing your editor all the materials they might need to review. So whether that's beat sheets, scripts, the whole season outline, episode thumbnails, anything that they need to look at, you should be able to provide to them efficiently and time effectively. Communicate with your editor. So again, making sure you are also keeping open the comms of communication, and it's not just your editor. And then making sure you meet your deadlines so that your editor isn't running after you, wondering where your episode is. So project management will probably be the thing that is shared between the creator and the editor the most, since the creator will have the creative roles, your editor will have more managerial roles. But when it comes to the project itself, that's where we both will have some responsibilities. So again, while your editor will give you a lot of the tools to be self-sufficient and autonomous, you need to learn and adapt these skills as well, so that, again, it's a partnership that both of you can keep track of all of these things rather than just one person be dedicated to keeping track. So knowing when your deadlines are, and I mentioned your editor should not be chasing you for your deliverables. You should be delivering them on time. You should be able to supervise yourself and anyone else on your team. Your editor will probably only have communication with you rather than the rest of your team. So you will have to be the middleman for a lot of product communication. And then setting realistic schedules. So if your editor is asking for a weekly delivery, but you say, I need 10 days, then you guys can try and figure out what would be best for your delivery and also maintaining those deadlines. So again, it's all about that partnership. You're not working towards expecting to be on the weekly delivery schedule like your editor asks, but actually talking to them and seeing what would work best for the whole team. There will never be a time where you are alone. An editor will be there throughout the whole life cycle of the series, up until the end, up until you say, this is it, this is the last episode. I myself have seen the series Muted end and the series Edith end just this year. Quite sad, but it's been such a fun time to see them go through this whole series with such passion and vigor and being a part of that process as well. So something that you will always be working with somebody else with, even if you don't have assistants, you will always have that editor. You will always be able to rely on them whenever it comes to hard times or when it comes to any sort of implication or success that your series might see when you're working with an editor. So closing thoughts, remember your editor is just that extra assistance to help you in your series. Not all success needs an editor, and success isn't guaranteed with having an editor. But, it is quite fun to share that creative journey with somebody else just as passionate. Now, I would like to open do we have 5 minutes for Q&A? Kirsten?
All right, let me pull up our questions, Bre. I've been taking note of them. We had a few that were actually specific to some of the content that you oversee. So I want to start with those if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Specifically with your amazing romance series. How do you advise your creators on writing romance? What are some of the tips that you use for writing a slow burn? Not going too slow as to be dull, but not too fast as to leave the story of nowhere to go.
That's a really good question. To keep it short and simple, having that character dynamic between your protagonist and your deuteragonist, which your deuteragonist is usually the love interest, is there that connection, that tension? Do they have the touch and the blush moment? And that is actually a phrase used all the time by editors here at WEBTOON. The moment where they touch hands and they blush, and that was the moment they fell in love with each other. For slow burns, I always like to introduce a conflict, and as they continue to overcome that conflict, introduce another conflict. And it's just a building block for issue after issue until they finally get to that point where they're finally together. Maybe introduce another love interest, or maybe introduce a situation that happens that kind of drives them apart. So there's lots of opportunities to keep the romance interesting, but making sure that romance is integrated into your plot, so that's what makes it interesting, and not just when are they going to kiss? There's no reason for them not to kiss. There's always a reason that they're not kissing. So you have to come up with those reasons.
That's amazing. Oh, that's amazing. I'm blushing on this end. But I'm curious, yeah. There were some questions about what are beats per episode? And do you have any tips on ways that we can outline our beats with story structure?
Yes, beats, a very good question. Beats are the important part of your series, and there's lots, and it should only be a few words in a bullet point format. A beat list would just be bullet points of everything that happens that's important, that drives your plot forward. And what I like to do in pacing a 40-panel minimum episode is to have 2 beats per episode. So your episode starts with a beat, and it midway starts to wrap up that beat. But by the end of that episode, you're actually introducing a whole new beat, AKA the cliffhanger, so that readers would want to come back and see how that beat completes. And then you're just going to keep doing the cycle over and over and over. And that's a really good system of getting readers intrigued with your episodes, no matter the publishing schedule. But by the end of the episode, you're still leaving them wanting more. There's still so much left unsaid. So trying to utilize those beats in a little more efficient way so that, again, the readers keep being hooked back in. So
that's great. Thank you, Bre. I hope that helps our audience today. Some of our other questions dealt with professionalism. We mentioned that pitching to WEBTOON is primarily posting to Canvas. This offers some great benefits, like you can monetize your comic, you have ownership over your rights and IP, and you have ownership over that following. But Bre, can you outline a little bit more about the process that creators go through when they're being scouted as potential original series? Are there things that they can be doing? For instance, having a strong hook in the first 3 episodes, posting consistently that will really stand out to editors? And what does it look like when they're outreached?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think, well, a lot of the editors, whenever they're looking through Canvas, we're looking for potential. Because not every series has an editor, so everything might not be actually the structure that we're looking for, but what we're looking for is that potential. Like, what is the series hook? What are the character motivations? We're looking at the world building. How efficient is it? Or maybe the art is gorgeous. So we try to see all the strengths and we try to see all the weaknesses. And, what we'll do when we reach out, if we're intrigued by a story, is basically ask for that information. So like if we don't have enough on the plot, we might say, would you be willing to pitch us a document that actually has all of your plot laid out so we can make a more informed decision? Or maybe the plot is really, really great, but for some reason, this particular Canvas creator is working in paginated format in black and white. So we might ask, hey, would you like to submit sample episodes that are vertical format in color? And of course, all of this would be under an NDA. And if we do ask for sample episodes, there would be like a fee that we would offer as well. We do not ask for work for free, but we are trying to see what the potential is for each series. So putting your best potential and putting your best foot forward would always get our attention. So understanding your strengths and putting those at the beginning of your episodes do tend to gravitate an editor's perception. We do tend to look at like the newer updates as well, because we always understand that the longer you work on a series, your art style is going to change, your storytelling is going to change. So we do try to compare and contrast. But it is always good to see like a really well thought out series from beginning to its current publishing episode. So that's my advice that I can give, or just at least be prepared for that outreach if we do reach out. So
I think that's great advice. And it does sound like it's very individual per creator as well. So that might be more of an individual question. But you mentioned that you like to see a series planned out to the current posting date. Is there a certain point that you would like series planned out to? For instance, do they need to have final plans for their full series? Do they need to have the first arc figured out? Is there anything that you would have expectations for what level of completion they're at with the full?
That is a good question. There, again, it kind of depends on the series and the creator. Sometimes we do an intel on a series and the creator is very honest with us. Like, I haven't thought totally through the whole series. I have vague ideas of how I want the series to end, but all the in-betweens, I'm still a little lost. But for an editor, we still might see that potential and we say, like, that's worth the risk. Like, let's go ahead and maybe give an offer. Other times they have the complete, like, 40-page pitch with every single detail of their series lined out, ready to read. And that we don't have time to read. So we would ask for a more simplified version, shorter synopses, or maybe breaking down your series into arcs. So something that's manageable for us to read. So again, it really depends. We don't actually have an expectation, but if we do reach out asking for like what the plot will look like in the next couple seasons or what the end of the series will look like we would love to see where you stand in that aspect.
That's a great answer. Thank you. There's a comment here I just want to give a quick shout out to. Editors are the all might star decus. Absolutely. I laughed pretty hard when I saw that comment, but you are so right. Switching back just a little bit to the way that editors work with creators. If a creator has any health concerns arise, specifically chronic health issues, is there a cap on the hiatus that creators are allowed to take, or how do you work with people during unexpected health issues that arise?
That's a good question. It, again, depends on the issue. It depends on how long the hiatus will need to be. There has been many times where unexpected hiatuses need to occur, and we have like many different options for what the hiatus could look like. We could release all FastPass, or we could freeze everything and just not release any more episodes. But I do think after a certain amount of time, and if there's no expectation to return in a timely manner, we might have to release all the FastPass episodes, because we don't believe in keeping things under a pay gate when it's not necessary for that long. Because WEBTOON is a free platform and FastPass is privilege, and we don't want to hold that privilege from readers if it's just going to be prolonged. So we would always talk to the creators, see what's the best option. Again, we don't always make the final decisions. We might if the creator is not communicating with us, but this is, again, a partnership, and it always will be. So if anything were to come up, that's where the editor and the creator would communicate on best next steps. Just making sure that what is best for the readers, what is best for the series, and what's best for the creator. Those will always be the priority.
Thank you, Bre, for answering those questions. But I do want to close with one final personal question for you, Bre. What's your favorite part of being a WEBTOON editor?
That's not even a hard question. The best part about being an editor is working with this amazing community. I am surrounded by so many talented folks from all walks of life, from just being able to work with them, or just being able to meet them or chat with them in an event like this. Like, the WEBTOON community, the WEBTOON creators are everything that keeps me here and keeps me doing what I'm doing. Meeting everyone is such a privilege. And I think this is like what makes my job worthwhile, being able to work with just really cool folks like all of y'all, and you too, Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Bre. And I want to back that up too. Thank you all for attending. We're so grateful that you joined us today for our event. This was put on for you. If you guys have requests for future workshops that we can be hosting, or you need information, please let us know via our socials, our different outlets for reaching the Canvas team. We're here to support you. We love the series that you put so much time and effort into every single week, every single month. We all read Canvas. I think everyone at WEBTOON is kind of a Canvas stand, right? So do know that we're celebrating you over here. We super appreciate your time today. We hope this was helpful, empowering, and inspiring for the future development of your series. And we hope that you tune in for future WEBTOON events. I'd love to connect in the future.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and all your questions.
Thank you, Bre. Please join me in thanking Bre Boswell today.
Thank you, everyone.